Hey, welcome back to another Bitcoin Reformation podcast. I'm Ben Haupt, joined by my friends Jared Townley and David Rufner. Great to be with you again for another episode, and excited to introduce you in a few minutes to our guest with us today, Ahshuwah Hawthorne. But Jared, how are things for you? What's new with the Townley family?
So as of today, when we're recording, we are approximately 4 weeks away from baby number 3. So the reality is starting to hit, if you will. I feel like I've been able to kind of push it off and just not really think about it. But at the same time, with all the things still in the new place, in the new role now for almost a month, just trying to live in the real moment. So yesterday, what that looked like, right? Yeah, Monday is my day off. And we were playing in our house, and for some reason I had one of my kids' blankies on my head, and I was running around just chasing them like I was going to tickle them, and it was like the most fun I have had with my kids in such a long time. And you would have thought that I was the scariest, most fun monster with just a blanket on my head saying, "I'm gonna get you." And it was so much fun. Half an hour of just tickling my kids and hearing them laugh and enjoying and trying to soak up those things. So in the midst of all the craziness, chaos, big changes happening, I've been trying to sort of live in the smaller moments and just take those as they come and enjoy them too. So that's what's going on here where I am. David, how are things where you are today?
Yeah, they're good. Mountain weather. We had snow and sleet and rain for about 48 hours just in the last 2 days. And then yesterday, and then today it's gorgeous now again. But thankful for the rain because it is so dry here. Let's see. What have I been up to? Listened to a podcast today to get introduced to you, Oshawa. I listened to How Bitcoin Transforms Funding for Global Missions that you did May 11th a year ago. So that was fun. I had a drive this morning, so listen to that. I'll mention something about our 4 kids and then about Oshawa as well, a general rule of thumb I have. But yeah, the 2 olders are both out of university for the summer, which means I have a 2-month window with no tuition payments. So celebrate with me if you would.
Woo!
Everybody else is doing really well. Baseball continues here for the youngest as the high school team made playoffs. I just love baseball here in the spring. But apart from that, here's my rule of thumb. Anybody who even has one more child than you have, it just sounds like a lot. And I think I may have heard. Did I hear 7? And we're gonna go fully back to that because I got to send it to Ben here first, and then he'll go to you. But Asho, did I hear 7 children? You and your wife?
Old news.
Oh,
That's old news. It's 8 now. God bless it.
Yeah, it is.
Bravo. Okay, we're gonna hear more about that. But I had fun thinking about that today. About your crew. I can imagine the ages, although you have a new age, it sounds like. You and the Townleys here are in it together. So that's what I have going on and on the mind a little bit. Excited about the conversation today. So Ben, let's round it out with you and then we'll launch into the life with Oshawa here.
yeah, things are good at the Haupt house. We are gearing up for the end of the school year. I have a senior in high school and an 8th grader, and so graduations all the way around. We are just finishing out theater season, so Aiden was chosen to be the director of the student-run musical, and they did Wonka, the story of Willy Wonka, pretty much straight from the movie. Same songs and a couple different things, but it was a super fun show. Noah's gearing up for a big choir concert at the end of the year, and his fun thing is that he's going to sing a song, a solo, auf Deutsch, full German solo, and so he asked dear old dad for a little bit of help with the pronunciation. So I've done a little bit of German. I am back working on my translation book of a bunch of German writings on mission, and so that's been fun. And then my most recent Bitcoin story is that last week I was up in Chicago for Pastoral Leadership Institute, and I was teaching in this session called Senior Leader. It's a cohort of 4 sessions, 4 immersions, and the person that was leading, I was sitting at one of the tables, and the person leading said you have to share with your neighbor one thing that's interesting about you. And, why not? I chose that I'm a Bitcoiner, and people were amused by that. There were some good questions that were asked, and so always fun to slip Bitcoin into the conversation whenever I can. And speaking of Bitcoin and ministry, especially, really excited to have Ahshuwah Hawthorne with us, and with your 8 kids, tell us a little bit about your
Maybe more.
family.
All I
And
know is it was 7+,
yeah,
right?
maybe
Maybe they
it's
had
even
twins
more
or
than that.
triplets.
It is 8. Yes.
Okay.
Mhm.
All right. And what are the ages?
So we also have a high school graduate this year. So 18. Actually, most of them are summer babies. So the summer ages will be 19 and then 2 years down through. So 3 girls, 2 years apart, and then 3 boys, 2 years apart. And then we have a 5-year-old girl and a newborn.
Phenomenal.
Wow.
Wonderful.
God bless you. That's amazing.
Yeah, it's
So it's a
called
lively.
low time preference. When you
Mm-hmm.
when you you invest in the next generation, when you structure your life around seeking to have a godly seed. There's you give up certain things, but or as like Randy Alcorn would say, you can't take it with you, but you can send it forward. So in parenting
Nice.
and thinking generationally, there's a lot of sending forward
Yeah.
Great.
of
Yeah.
your
That's
energy
good.
and investments. Yep.
Love
I
that.
love it. Well, super excited to have you on. I got to know of you a little bit through our friend Jordan Bush, and thank God for Bitcoin. We had Jordan and Daniel on the show to talk about their most recent book maybe a couple months ago, I guess now. But got connected up with you through this partnership that an organization that you are with called Brilliance Labs was doing a partnership with Thank God for Bitcoin and encouraging ministries to get into Bitcoin. And I reached out and got an email from you. And so excited for how that is kind of bringing us together and how that will all shake up. But first, want to start off with just hearing a little bit of your story, your Christian story and your Bitcoin story.
Sure. Well, I was born and raised on the Big Island of Hawaii, and so it was not in a Christian family. A lot of, you could say, a very pluralistic and even almost a new age spiritual environment that I was in, and a lot of different cultures and influences. And I met Christ as a high schooler. It was just a real radical transformation, and set a trajectory in my life to serve Christ through ministry. And I thought I would do film school and make movies. And then
Mm-hmm.
I did a year of film school in LA, and my best memory was preaching a sermon at the local Christian fellowship on campus. And so the call to ministry of the word was really strong in my life. And so I transferred to Multnomah Bible College, which is how I ended up in Portland, Oregon, and studied the biblical languages. Just kind of geeked out, lived in the library, wanted to read the Bible and to read it well, and then got called to do church planting. Did that in my hometown. You could say we kind of planted a mission outpost in a very post-Christian, very pluralistic community. And the church is still there today. Actually, I'm doing another podcast with Jordan Bush and that pastor, and then another longtime friend. So I appreciate the old friendships, and podcasts give you a great excuse to just be on a call with an old friend that no longer lives in town. So I totally relate. And so we did church planting, and then we handed over that church and got involved in more deliberate mission work So I've served with now 3 different mission organizations in different roles, often very much in that entrepreneurial, help start new things and / break things along the way. And I've just kind of had to come to peace with that part of who I am, of being an entrepreneur and seeing new ideas and running with them, and then not managing them well and needing to hand them off to others. And so, yeah, we've been basically full-time missionaries since 2010 and working in different roles. And then in 2020, we started a faith journey to start an organization that's essentially a startup incubator, but for kingdom projects and ideas and churches. And we were involved in a church closure, and the congregation wanted to entrust the resources of the church back into the city. And so I was involved in starting a new ministry that would take the investment of the resources from the church that closed and then deploy them strategically into kingdom projects within our city. And so built that organization from scratch, starting in 2020. And that was a strange time to start an organization and close a church, but we walked through that. And that's where the Bitcoin journey starts, because at the same time, and Oregon went really hardcore and shutting everything down and closing things off. And so I just had a lot of time at home. And this is when Clubhouse was just getting started, this drop-in audio app where you could just listen in on conversations, kind of like Twitter Spaces today, but before that was a thing.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a lot of Bitcoiners at the time that were there, and it was that started that cycle in 2020, 2021. And I just spent a lot of time listening to these conversations. And I had a good friend that I've known for years who started talking about Bitcoin and making some investments, and I'm like, okay, I have to take this seriously. And I was listening to the Preston Pish podcast, which is originally was a value investing podcast called We Study Billionaires, and they would talk about Warren Buffett, and they would do stock analysis and securities, kind of what's your stock pick and why do you think this is the best one, and so I'd been listening to that for years, and kind of side hustling and side funding my missions work with investing, and enjoyed finance and all that. And then he started talking about Bitcoin while my other longtime friend was getting into Bitcoin, and I'm like, okay, I got to check this out. And so then that was the start of the journey. And then basically, I mean, if you jump into Bitcoin, there's the technological layer, but there's also the social layer, right? Of the relationships that are there, and because it's an open source project, but it's not just the GitHub, right? Even right now, there's this debate about Bitcoin Core and who's right and all this stuff, and it's like, well, I'm not a coder. I'm an entrepreneur. In fact, I'm a social entrepreneur, and I'm a missionary and a pastor. So I'm not going to be like submitting commits on the GitHub, but in the area that I bring influence, I think I can contribute, and I think I can help steer this open source project in a God honoring way. And so I just really dived into the social layer, and I said, okay, let's find all the Christians in this space. Let's find the people that are into global kingdom work, and then let's also go into my world of church leaders and mission leaders, and let's find the Bitcoiners there, and let's find the overlap, and let's just try things out. And so social innovation there's a whole strategy to that of experimentation. And that's where the labs idea comes in to Brilliance Labs, is right. God is most brilliant in his glory, and people made in his image reflect that brilliance. And even if you look up the word, brilliance means, right, a brilliant, bright light. It also speaks to a brilliant and profound idea. or person, but it also speaks to, you can turn up the brilliance on your monitor, and that creates color saturation. And so part of our mission is also to see people from every tongue and tribe and nation representing the worship of Christ, and contributing their own cultural gifts to the kingdom work. And so we're very deliberate in say, hey, let's go to the kind of the neglected spaces. Let's bring diverse voices to the table, and not like I would not a DEI type of check box kind of diversity, but like, let's genuinely learn from people that have different cultural backgrounds from us, and let's see the gospel, and let's see Bitcoin get into and find itself becoming indigenous in different cultural expressions. So there you go. That's a little about me.
Was it easy to find that overlap? I mean, you mentioned you're going out, you're going to find this overlap. I mean, I think of thank God for Bitcoin, and as Ben said, some of your bio, some of the things I know you're part of. But maybe that was easy, maybe that was not easy. I mean, what was it?
Yeah. So I did find the Thank God for Bitcoin guys pretty early because of their book, and I emailed Jimmy Song because
Oh yeah,
we were talking about, we were thinking through this idea of, let's do like a mission conference for Bitcoin. And so I reached out to Jimmy Song, and he's like, oh, that's a great idea. Here, I'll introduce you to this Jordan Bush guy. And we start talking, and the idea came up. Oh, actually, and it was Jimmy's idea. He's like, you got to do a satellite conference for like a Christian Bitcoin conference connected to the big Bitcoin Magazine event. And this is like 4 years ago. And so he threw the idea out there, and then Jordan and another gentleman that I connected him to ended up running with it. And so I mean, I like it in that process of seeing what's out there. I like making connections. And so
yeah.
I kind of met these guys, and then they ran with this really awesome conference and project. They've done an excellent job with it. In the missions world, I remember, Bitcoin time is like a blur, but I think this was 22, maybe. I had orange pilled another missions coworker friend, and we were going to a Missio Nexus event, which is the largest gathering of mission leaders in North America. And another friend had introduced us to Eric Hersman. Now, at the time, this is before Eric started Gridless, which is this Bitcoin mining company in Africa. But he was still a Bitcoiner, and he was throwing around different ideas. But he's, I mean, fundamentally an entrepreneur, and had several tech startups in Africa. And so he was the main speaker at this Missio Nexus event. And so we just cold call him, and we're just like, hey, we'll be at the event. We'd love to chat. And we wanted to find other Bitcoiners here. And he's like, okay, great. And so we actually got Eric Hersman from the main stage with like 1,000 mission leaders in this auditorium to say, hey, if any of you want to talk about Bitcoin and its use in missions, come down front. I'd love to talk to you.
Come on down.
Yeah,
Altar
come on
call.
down. Exactly. He did a Bitcoin altar call at the missions conference. I don't know if that's a Lutheran thing, but we did anyway. So, and it's crickets, nothing. Like, there was a gal that needed help with her Coinbase account. And that was about it. And so it was me and my buddy, and then one other gal from our org, and Eric. And then we got like 2 hours with him, just brainstorming all these use cases. And he's this real entrepreneurial thinker. And so that was year one, was nothing. But then that next year, we applied for an innovation grant, and we got funded to do these Bitcoin for Missions training events. And our whole idea was, hey, we want to be Bitcoin tourists, and we want to see all the cool spots around the world where Bitcoin is having an impact. And so let's write a grant. Actually, I'm totally being sarcastic, but at the same time, you're like, hey, I'd love to go to El Salvador, so let's write that into a grant. So we applied for this innovation grant to do these trainings. and we say, hey, let's go to an active Bitcoin project that's led from a faith-driven perspective, and let's expose other missionaries to that, and let's see what we can dream up together. So we were hosted by the Bitcoin Beach folks in El Salvador. We were there almost 2 weeks, an event there, and then Eric hosted us in Kenya and did an event there, and then now in November we'll be in India and doing an event there. And so that was it'd been a sweet journey, learning and exploring. But I shared that story because the next year we were announced from the stage, hey, we're funding this innovation grant, exploring the use cases for Bitcoin and missions. And we, at that event, this would have been probably 23, we had nonstop conversations with executive directors, with heads of finance, with international directors. And there was an openness, there was a need, and a lot of it was around cross-border payments and the challenges of getting money into certain parts of the world. And there was real interest, and that's where we've begun kind of pulling that string and seeing what's there around creative access funding.
That's fantastic. I was just listening to a podcast of Jack Dorsey the other day, and he was talking about remittances being, for him, one of the most important use cases beyond store of value. Mm-hmm. And he's certainly done a lot of global work for Bitcoin. So how exactly did Brilliance Labs get started? And it's been fascinating just listening to how you got connected up with these people and things you're trying. Tell us a little bit more about Brilliance and kind of the background of it, or the organizational side of it.
Yeah. So it was birthed out of a legacy church that was closing, and we kind of had a couple options. At the time, we had a building that we wouldn't wish on any other church. It was way too big, and it had way too much deferred maintenance. And so there's been a lot of really artful church closures in our city, where you have a young church that needs a building, and you have an older legacy church that has a building, and hey, let's kind of let them meet and merge, and the new church brings energy, and they renovate the building, and it's a great kind of marriage that happens. Well, we had a building that was worth a meaningful amount of money, but more for the property than for the building. And so we had just a few options, and a lot of the normal kind of well-trod paths didn't seem like the right ones. And so I presented a vision of, hey, how about I gather a board, and we create a vision around stewarding these funds, and it's kind of modeled after a foundation that then is going to write grants and give funding to projects, but it's also modeled after a venture capital kind of startup incubator where it's value plus. So it's not just, hey, here's money, but also we're going to provide value. We're going to provide coaching, consulting, like design sprint work to help you think through what you're starting and how to effectively fulfill your mission. And so that was you could say the programs or the mission part of it, of stewarding these funds and seeing them deployed in strategic ways. But then here you have this organization that you're starting, and we need to form an endowment of sorts that is able to retain the value of the funds and deploy the income from that fund. And I mean, most new nonprofits don't have that problem, but most foundations, that's how they're structured, right? You have a donor that has a large amount of money. He's like, I want to faithfully steward this. So they form a foundation. So we had a similar process where we brought on a board, where we had an investment committee, where we interviewed wealth managers and eventually hired a wealth manager to steward our investment fund. And this is at the same time that I'm studying Bitcoin. And so I was able to build a team on our investment committee. We're able to hire a wealth manager, and it would have been in 2021, that saw you could say the investment thesis of Bitcoin and its value proposition. And on our investment committee side, they were willing to listen to my proposal to say, let's allocate a portion of our fund to Bitcoin. And then our wealth manager, who at the time there was no ETFs, right? So there's no way for him, they wouldn't custody it, they wouldn't manage it for us. But he said, yeah, sure, I'll give my blessing as long as it's not some crazy allocation that he views as
So what
crazy.
did you start with? Can I ask?
Sure, yeah. So we did essentially a 6% allocation, and our wealth manager said, now you have to rebalance with your main portfolio, because if this just grows too much, or it gets out of hand, then that their kind of philosophy says, well, now it's your portfolio is too risky, because now your portfolio is too volatile. And there is something to be said for that. If the goal is a stable and slowly growing fund that produces income every year, it's kind of like your retirement account. You're living off of it. You do want a stable balance in that retirement account so that you can continue to live off of it. And so yeah, he wanted a 6% rebalanced, and I pushed for half. I wanted half of that to be not rebalanced, just hodled for at least 3 or 4 years. And so that's what we did. And it bore a lot of fruit. It really did work well for us. And I could, if you want to jump into that side of this thing and the like treasury endowment strategy side, we learned a lot.
I think so, Ahshuwah, for a couple of reasons. I watched an interview earlier. I mentioned that I think you did this already. I caught a little bit of this in the past, but different audience, and maybe a year later. I'm literally looking at Ben here as well, knowing that he's thinking about PLI. I'm thinking long-term about the organization I serve. And this is a conversation without a guest who has walked down this path like you, that we have entertained, just the three of us, saying maybe more locally a church should think about having something like this as an emergency reserve. Slightly different. And yet, I'm going to guess what you're about ready to share, if you'll just keep going down that way, would be fruitful for us all.
Sure. Yeah, I'd be happy to do that. So when I presented to our investment committee, obviously, right, there's all these questions. It's not a standard asset class. It's not established. This is, again, pre-ETFs. But the reality of Bitcoin is that it's less correlated than the rest of your portfolio. And if your goal is to have maybe it's an emergency reserve, or maybe this is an endowment structure, so that you're using to fund other ministries. I know another group that they have a fund where they gather their whole staff together once every 4 years at a location, and they need to be able to save that money so that it's there when they all make that expense. So where are you storing that money? Whether it's an emergency reserve, whether it's a formal endowment structure, whether it's just some kind of like, hey, we have to save for a building project, or we're saving for a Bible translation, or an all-staff retreat. Whatever it is, you hold cash. And so standard, like, nonprofit best practices is usually, well, you stay out of anything volatile. And at most, you put it in a savings account, or you put it in a 60-40 portfolio if it's meant to be an endowment. And the problem is that you are going to underperform, not just the market, but the actual inflation numbers, and the cost of doing business continues to go up to such a degree that if you're holding cash, you're actually not, I would argue, you're not being a good steward. You're agreeing to lose money every year. You're just, and it's within, you understand the whole money printer concept, right? Where the new money that enters the system, those people benefit the most. Those are the people accessing debt. Those are the bankers in New York. Those are the venture capitalists in Silicon Valley. And the farther you get from that money printer, the older the money is, and the more you're affected by the debasement of it and the inflation. Well, guess who's at the end of that line, right? Churches and ministries that are funded by the donations of normal people.
Truly at the end of the line. Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Yeah,
Even
and
further
when life gets
down
more
than the worker.
expensive from the normal people, like often, I mean, the Lord knows, but it's like the offering gets cut because it's like, well, I got to buy new shoes for the kids.
Yep.
And so when you actually look at the numbers, I just saw a recent chart. I could share it with you guys afterwards if it's helpful, of comparing a like S&P performance versus a 3% Bitcoin allocation and a 97% cash allocation.
Yep.
And the portfolio of just cash and a little bit of Bitcoin is way less volatile and performs better than the stock market. And so if I can tell you, I'm going to give you, you're going to outperform every professional investor. You're not going to have to pay anyone or pay a fee of management to anyone, and you're going to have less volatility than the stock and bond market. Would you sign up for that investment? You're like, well, it's probably a scam, right? Or actually, it's you have to look past that, right? You actually have to do your homework. But no, that's what Bitcoin offers to anyone who's willing to do the homework. And so that would be my baseline argument is if you have to hold cash in your balance sheet for any reason, you can counteract all the inflation by just a 1 or 2% allocation.
That's right.
Even a 1%. If you want an extra little bonus return, you make it 3%.
I love it. And so this is part of Brilliance Labs got into clearly hodling some Bitcoin, and now you've extended this offer to ministries that you would even do some matching of a donor that wants to give to a ministry, and I think there's some strings attached. There's some stipulations, which as a Bitcoiner I really appreciate. But tell us a little bit about that matching program.
Sure. So I've had lots of conversations with CFOs and executive directors and pastors and all these folks in this world, and there's just so many barriers to taking the steps to adopt Bitcoin, to use it, to hold it. And so we just try to think through creative ways to align incentives to make it easier. And so we're working with TGFB as well as the Magnalia Foundation. So Tim Fox and Jim McAndrew. I do a podcast with them too. That's my Presbyterian podcast. So I'm happy to hang out with Lutherans today. Nice. So, but we just basically said, hey, how do we align the incentives between Bitcoin donor, church and or Christian ministry, and the mission of our organizations? And so we felt like the best way to do it would be to go to the donors, because you have Bitcoiners that are already giving to their church or to their favorite ministry or charity, and that group probably doesn't accept Bitcoin, or if they do, they have a service that for a fee auto converts it for them. Yep. And then they just get the cash. But then they're missing out on the appreciation of it, and the Bitcoiner maybe is more likely to just hold on to their Bitcoin because of that. And so we went to the donors and said, hey, nominate a church or ministry that you are already committed to giving Bitcoin to, and we will match that donation up to a certain amount. And in this case, it's a small amount. It was 210,000 sats, about $200. But then we said we will match it if the ministry custodies it themselves. And now I don't mean self-custody. I just mean they have a company that they have an account with. They hold the Bitcoin, and then they hold it for at least 9 months. So they get the donation, they hold it for 9 months, and then we will give that matching gift. And And it's kind of a test. Like and for us, a handful of ministries have responded and have been open. Others, they might say, oh, this is just not worth the lift to do this. But I mean, if you have Bitcoin donors, they will tend to be, especially if they've been involved in it for multiple years, more high net worth people and more ideological in their thinking about Bitcoin. And so if you want to have essentially build that donor base within the Bitcoin community, you have to go to where they're at. And then, so that's the structure we developed. And then we have Bitcoin educators on our team, and we worked to develop essentially a packet of resources and frequently asked questions that say, hey, here's how you set up your custody account. This is who we recommend. This is how you talk to your bookkeeper about it. This is how you deal with your gift policy. And so we're trying to help make it as easy as possible, because it can easily get bogged down in a board of directors and a conversation, and let's start a committee and investigate this thing, and we'll get back to you in 9 months. And it's like, well, actually, maybe here's a way to streamline it.
I ask just like a really super practical question here. I mean, this is you are talking and speaking in such a way that I just feel so excited, right? So I love entrepreneurial people because I'm not that way. I have ideas, they come really slowly, and when they come, usually it's probably too late at that point, but I'm really good at getting stuff done, right? So you want me, I'm the executor on your team, right? So we work really well together in that way. So help me, the sort of executor person, or help our listener, right, who maybe isn't that sort of brainstorming type person. If I'm a Bitcoiner, I'm a pastor here of a church, our budget's like $3.5 million because we have a school. But if I'm just a regular congregation person, help me know, what should I do if I want my church, my ministry to start doing Bitcoin savings, whether it's in cash, like you said, just a small portion, or just how should I think about going to someone, whether it's my board or my pastor, how should I think about talking about Bitcoin with them?
Yeah, great question. So as a donor, you do have a little bit of influence, right? So you're not just saying like, hey, you guys you should buy Bitcoin. Now, most board of directors, as fiduciaries, I would say, well, that's not responsible. That's not what we're in the business of doing. We're in the business of preaching the gospel, right? Where, yes, we need to be stewards of our resources, but that feels like you're taking an active step to invest in a possibly volatile asset. So that seems for a lot of groups out of the question. But as a donor, you have two things that go on within even nonprofit law in the U.S. First, a nonprofit or church has to use all donations to the furtherance of their nonprofit mission and purpose. And so as a Christian ministry or church, that's gospel ministry. So you bear ultimate responsibility and authority to spend all the monies given to you for that purpose. At the same time, there's something called restricted funds, and this kind of essential agreement with your donors that you will do your best to honor a donor's wishes if they have a preference. Now, a donor can come to you and say, hey, I want this to be benevolence money, or I want this to be global mission money, or you have a building project, I want this to be for the building project. Now, a lot of donors don't know this, though. You could come and you can make any request, essentially, and you as a board can choose if you're going to accept that money or not. You might be like, no, that's not reasonable. We're just not going to get into that. But hey, maybe try donating it to this ministry. You can turn down a donation. But as a Bitcoiner, you can go to your church and say, I have Bitcoin that I want to donate. It's a tax advantage to me, and I think it'd be a blessing to the church. Will you accept this donation? And they'll have to think about it and go through the steps. But you can also even add to that and say, hey, I want to donate it, but I would like it to be earmarked for 2030's budget or the building project. Or, hey, you know what? Does a church have a new roof fund? Well, no, we actually don't. Okay, I want it to be the new roof fund that's going to get spent in 10 years. And the donor can do that. And And if it's enough of a donation, right, that the church they're like, okay, I want to honor this, or if they feel like you can educate them also. So then that's where somewhere like Brilliance Labs would come in, or Magnalia Foundation, or TGFB, where the donor can say, hey, and I have some folks that will help you guys set up this account. Or if you're enough of you have some technical experience and you know how to use hardware wallets, you could say something like, hey, I got you guys a hardware wallet. I know you have a church safe. Here's how it works. Like, we're going to set up the seed phrase for you guys, and you're going to put your seed phrase in the safe, and I'm going to just send this to your wallet, and there it is. And you guys open it up in 5 years, and I'll help you sell it. So like, there's ways to do it, right? And depending on what their openness is, I think the incentives can align for them to be willing to accept it.
That's fantastic.
I love it.
And as both a donor to ministry organizations, but also in my professional role as the executive director of this ministry, I'm interested even in the reserves potential for Bitcoin, because I see us holding a bunch of cash. We have an investment manager that we've hired. It's a very, very basic 60-40 allocation, and it's just been slaughtered. And I know that we could do so much better with this money that was given to us sacrificially. And we use it on this podcast a lot, the melting ice cube metaphor of losing purchasing power. And I feel duty bound to think differently about our reserves and about our fiscal health as an organization. But I love the idea of introducing Bitcoin in any way that we can, and we'll see how my organization does with it. It's important for me to continue to work well with the board, and I love my board, and a lot of board members are this. It's scary to be thinking about Bitcoin, especially, still I think the vast majority of Christians are not holding any kind of Bitcoin, and maybe Christians are sometimes some of the last people to get into Bitcoin because they're not always early adopters.
But Ben, if I may, and you can stop me if you want to keep going in a particular direction, but I'd love to pivot on that and ask a question. I think I know how I would answer it. Spent enough time with Ben and Jared that I know some of the ways they would answer it. But we mentioned good stewardship, and stewardship is something Christians talk about. It's not as if we've got the corner on that market, but we believe in a created world, a received world, a redeemed world. We believe in a God who is present and active. Christ is risen, right? So stewardship is certainly there. Are there other reasons within our Christian faith, from where you sit, Ahshuwah, where Bitcoin goes well with a life in Christ?
That's interesting. So I would come at it in two different angles, and so one is just like human flourishing and the tools that we have to see people flourish, and to see, you could say, like free economies that lead to prosperity for all those involved. So globally, right, you have there's just a lot of poverty, and a lot of that is the result of lack of rule of law, lack of free markets. Wayne Grudem has a great economics text where he essentially applies the 10 Commandments and property rights and a biblical theology of economics, and then he studies it globally and is like, yeah, basically anywhere there's poverty, it's because their economy doesn't operate biblically. There's not protection of property rights. There's not free markets. And so understanding that Bitcoin is built with this as its own, you could say, respecter of property rights, and you can't steal someone's Bitcoin if they're holding the keys and have learned that self-sovereignty and self-responsibility. There is a respect of property rights. There is a respect of free markets. You don't get to censor someone's transactions. You don't get to stop people from doing commerce. And so it's essentially, I mean, one way I can describe it is there is an economic policy encoded into this software, and so if you run this software, you get free markets and property rights. This is this network. You join the network, you get all of these rights and freedoms that are founded in what it means to be made in the image of God, what it means to be a free and sovereign individual. I mean, going all the way back to life, liberty, and property rights of the foundations of Western civilization. Like it's just encoded in the blockchain, and if you participate in the network, you get that, no matter what your government says. Like whether your government gives that or not, you get it if that's the economy that you're operating in. And so the fact that you can give that to anyone on this planet, no matter what totalitarian regime, or like for our neighbors up north in Canada, I mean, everyone, they can enjoy it no matter what their government happens to say. And so I would argue that just having that means that, like, without being like platonic and separating spiritual and physical, like that's just human flourishing comes from freedom, and I'm forgetting who says it's not right. It's not freedom to do what you want. It's freedom to do what you ought, right? And that's what freedom is: living under God's authority, doing the things that a free Imago Dei representative of Christ on this earth gets to do. And Bitcoin gives that freedom in so many ways. And so that's at least one way that I see that playing out.
That's a fantastic answer, and that might be a great place to wrap it up. We are so grateful that you joined us for this. We just love the mashup between our life in Christ and the ministry and mission of the church, and then this crazy new thing that is the sort of reformation of a lot of society and economics called Bitcoin. So thank you for joining us, Ahshuwah. We look forward to continued partnership, friendship, and look forward to a lot more to come. Say hello to our friends over at Thank God for Bitcoin, and we'll be in touch soon.
Awesome. It was a great time being with you guys.
Thank you, Ahshuwah.